Yo, what is happening, guys? It is GM Cody back with another overview of an old game, another kind of out of print game, if you will. And this week, I let you guys vote about what I'm going to be talking about, and I presented four games, and you guys pretty much over half, almost half of you guys voted for me to take a look at Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, first edition. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. So Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I really like this game. This is a game I really love. I have played it before. I would say it's probably in my top 5 favorite like fantasy role-playing systems. Probably top 3 actually. So yeah, I really like Warhammer Fantasy. Unfortunately, though, it's one of those games I haven't been able to play enough of. I wish I could play more of, basically. But yeah, I've been a fan of the Warhammer world since I got into gaming. I mean, I've told it before. You know, I got introduced to gaming through the Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy miniatures game. And I'm still a fan of the old, Warhammer stuff. Not so much the current stuff, but the old stuff's really, really cool. And yeah, I've been a fan of that forever. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I was aware about pretty early on. But I didn't really play it until probably... I was probably in my 20s, first time I actually played Warhammer Fantasy. But needless to say, it's become one of my favorite fantasy role-playing systems. I do have the only other there's 4 editions of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Of course, this is the first edition. And by the way, Lynch, if you're watching, if you want your book back, just ask. Yeah. Just let me know if you want your book back, because I'm pretty sure this is yours. And I'm pretty sure you are going to be watching this. But yeah, so this is the first edition. This is the revised first edition that they reprinted in the 90s, but it's still the original game from the 1980s. There was the second edition, which I don't have much experience with, but from what I've looked through it, and for what I understand, well, I take that back. I think that was actually the first version I played, but I've never owned that book, the second edition. And from what I understand and from what I've looked at, it's very similar to the first edition. And I'm not really sure what all the changes are. So, but there's that. There's the second edition version. And then there was the third edition, which was probably the most controversial version. And I don't have much experience with that at all. It did not interest me whatsoever. That came out probably, I don't know, well over 10 years ago. And it was made by Fantasy Flight Games. And they tried to revamp the fantasy roleplay system and pretty much went away from the original core mechanics of the game, and they introduced all kinds of cards and all kinds of specialty dice and all kinds of things, and it really didn't interest me whatsoever. I don't think it really interests anybody. And most people were pretty turned off of it when it came out. And then they kind of redeemed themselves and released Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, which I do own, and I think it's a very, very good game. I really like this version too. In fact, if I was to run it today, I would probably run this. And I was running a campaign of 4th edition right before the pandemic, and that was a lot of fun. So 4th edition, pretty good, and I think sometime down the road we'll take a look at that one too. But tonight we're going to look at the classic, the 1st edition. And the 1st edition came out around the same time as Warhammer Fantasy Battles 3rd edition. Now, I don't really know which one came first. This came out, what year did this come out? 1987. And I think so. They came out around the same time. I'm not sure which came first. But one significant thing about the role-playing game over the miniatures game is it kind of built off the foundation. It really built the foundation of the lore of the Warhammer Fantasy world, the old world. It really filled in a lot of blanks. And it was supposed to be compatible with Warhammer Fantasy Battles 3rd Edition and Rogue Trader Warhammer 40,000, which was the first version of Warhammer 40,000. They were all supposed to be interconnectable and interchangeable and compatible with each other. Now, I've never tested that theory, but you could tell that they were trying to make it compatible with all their other game systems, even their miniatures games, which is quite interesting, actually, and it'd be interesting experiment to go back and forth. But that's not what we're talking about. Tonight we are talking about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 1st edition. So Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, this game was made by basically the who's who of Games Workshop at the time. So you've got those that aren't familiar with Games Workshop probably won't know any of these names, or you might know some of them. Those that are will be very familiar. Game design, Richard Hallowell, Rick Priestley, Graham Davis, Jim Bambra, and Phil Gallagher. Now, all those guys, all 5 of those guys were, created great games on their own. And, Rick Priestley's responsible for Warhammer 40,000. Richard Hallowell and Rick Priestley are responsible for Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Jim Bambra was also involved in the earlier editions of Warhammer Fantasy. So it was the who's who of Games Workshop here. And great art, too. You had the classic lineup of artists here. John Sibick and John Blanche and Jess Goodwin and Colin Dixon and Dave Andrews. Most of the art is done by Tony Ackland, and Tony Ackland was an awesome artist. Now, the cover art is John Sibick, and this cover really does pretty much sum up, not only what this game's about, but, what the Warhammer world is all about, too. This is going to be brutal. This is going to be grimdark, and things are going to die. So it does a really good job of summing up what this game's all about. And it's a pretty awesome cover, actually. I really love this cover. Every time I see the cover, I want to pick up the book and look through it. So, but let's get down to the meat and potatoes of the game system, shall we? I will say up front, too, that I might have to divide this up into 2 parts. Because this is a pretty hefty tome of a book, and there's a lot of information packed in it. And I'm not going to let this run too much over an hour, I don't think. So if it does, I'm going to stop at a good stopping point, and we will pick it up probably again next week. So let's take a look. Warhammer Fantasy Battles. So this is for those of you that never played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, not Fantasy Battles, Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game. It is a D100 system. And typically you are rolling a D100 under your attributes, okay, to resolve most things. Now, of course, not all attributes in the 1st edition Warhammer Fantasy RPG have, percentiles. Some of them go from 1 to 10. And we're going to take a look at that here in a minute. But that's the basic, the real down and dirty rule number 1 of Warhammer Fantasy is you're rolling a percentile, and usually you're trying to roll under one of your characteristics. And speaking of characteristics, these are the characteristics. You have movement, and it says an average move for a human is 4, which equates to 8 yards per 10 seconds moving at a cautious pace. Now, 10 seconds is the amount of time in a round of combat. So, and a horse's move is 8 by comparison. Now, interesting, like we were talking about the compatibility with Warhammer Fantasy Battles. This equates to the Fantasy Battles game. So if you looked at a human in here, let's look at a human profile. I think it's the same. It's movement 4. So humans, movement 4. So see, it's compatible with Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And even the percentile skills would be easy enough to extrapolate to Warhammer Fantasy Battles as well, because they're 1 to 100, skills. So yeah, the next characteristic you have is weapon skill. This determines your ability to fight in hand-to-hand combat, and it's determined by a percentage, 1 to 100. Ballistic skill is your ability to use missile weapons or throw things. Strength is strength, and it goes from 1 to 100 as well. I'm sorry, no. Strength is strength, but it does not go from 1 to 100. It goes from 1 to 10. Toughness is your ability to resist damage, and it goes from 1 to 10. Strength also adds to your... Strength is important because it adds to your damage in combat. Wounds is how many wounds you can take before you start taking critical hits and start suffering damage. You don't necessarily die at 0 wounds, and we'll look at that when we look at combat. Initiative is a percentage, 1 to 100, and determines your initiative. Attacks determines how many attacks you have, and it's a number like 1, 2, 3, etc. Dexterity is your dexterity, your ability to perform complex, intricate, and delicate manual tasks, and it will go from 1 to 100 as well. Leadership, pretty self-explanatory, your ability to lead others, it goes from 1 to 100. Intelligence, again, pretty self-explanatory, it goes from 1 to 100. Cool. This characteristic represents a creature's ability to remain calm and collected, even sane, under severe psychological stress, and this is an important thing in the game. And it goes from 1 to 100 as well. And cool was a stat. I'm sorry to compare it to the miniatures game, but I think it's interesting to do some comparisons with the old 3rd edition of the miniatures game. And cool was one of the stats in the 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles and in 40K that is no longer around nowadays. Willpower. Willpower is your measure of mental and magical resistance and goes from 1 to 100. And fellowship is your social skills, appearance, and ability to empathize and sympathize. And it goes from 1 to 100. And some cool art there. Lots of cool art in this book, by the way. So yeah, creating a character. So first off, what you do is most character creation is random. You get a couple choices, but for the most part, it's random. And it's quite fun, actually. And I do recommend sticking to the randomness if you're going to create characters, especially for the first time. But one choice you do get at the beginning is choosing your race. So you get to pick from a man, an elf, a dwarf, or a halfling. And then it tells you what dice to roll to determine your characteristics. After you do that, you would get a couple... you won't get anything for race yet, but then you'll roll up your age, determined by your race. You'll pick an alignment. You get a certain number of fate, rolled randomly depending on your race, and fate points are pretty much what you expect. They allow you to make re-rolls, or I don't think they allow you to make re-rolls. I think all they allow you to do is just cheat death, if I remember right. Which can be used during the game to save them from serious injury or death. The Game Master can explain how fate points work if the players wish, but for now it's enough to know that fate points are precious. They will certainly preserve the character's life. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's the only use of fate, but we'll look later. I can't quite remember. It's been a while since I've played this. Character classes. So, excuse me. This is another choice you get to make. And there are 4 classes and a multitude of other classes subclasses called professions underneath each of these classes. You do get to pick which initial class you're going to pick, and you get to pick from warrior, ranger, rogue, or academic. You do have to have there are characteristic requirements to be one of those. And then you get skills. Now, you get a certain number of skills. To determine how many skills a player has, roll a d4 and modify the result by the character's age. So you look at your age, cross-reference it with your race, roll a d4, and that's how many skills you have. Now, you do have mandatory skills you have to pick depending on what race you are. And then after that, you roll randomly to see what skills you have, depending on what class you picked from warrior, ranger, rogue, or academic, and also based on your race. And you get random skills. And skills work a bit differently than you think they would in this game, at least in the first edition. And we'll take a look at that when we get there as well. So yeah, you roll for your skills, it determines what skills you have. Trappings is what equipment you start with. You also start with a certain amount of gold, like I think it's 3d6 gold crowns. And then you will determine what your career is. Now, the career is random too. You do not get to choose your career unless your game master allows you to. And I've played games and ran games of Warhammer Fantasy where I've allowed people to pick their careers, but it's kind of fun just to roll randomly. And even in the new version, they have encouragements to make you roll randomly. And so you roll randomly on this chart depending on what class you picked and what your race is, and it will tell you what your career is. And as you can see, there is a multitude of different careers. So what the careers will give you is they will give you additional skills, additional trappings, equipment. They may or may not give you some magic. Now, the starter careers, there's only a handful, a few that actually can use magic, but that might be an option for you. And then you get a free advance. And we'll talk about advances a little bit more when we get to spending experience points. But basically, let's go look at careers. So let's just look at the agitator to start with here. So if you rolled agitator, you would start with these skills. You would start with public speaking and read and write. You would get these trappings, a hand weapon, a leather jack, and 2d10 leaflets for various causes. Dude, I love this stuff. It's so funny, but it's awesome too. It really puts you. The randomness really makes. I've noticed really makes players, really have to think on their feet as far as because they don't have any preconceived notion of what they're actually going to play, and so now they're really starting to develop their character, and this really helps them to develop their character, and it's a lot of fun too. And then so anyways, you have this advanced scheme, and what this is when you spend experience points, you can make an advance. And this either if it's a percentile characteristic, you can advance it by increments of +10. Or if it's a 1 to 10 characteristic, you can increase it in increments of +1. And this is the maximum amount of times you can advance, what characteristics you can advance as an agitator, and the maximum number of advancements you can have as an agitator. So, he can raise his weapon skill, but only once. His ballistic skill, once. He can raise his wounds twice. He can advance his initiative by once, leadership once, and fellowship once. And then after you're done with that, you would have to move on to another career to, advance your character anymore. Now, you don't necessarily have to complete a career to advance to another career, but it does help, and we'll look at that later. And if you look here, it has career exits. So you can technically exit to any other career if you want to change careers. But if you change to one of the career exits, it costs less experience points, and you can also just change to another career inside of your class, and it costs a little bit more. Or you can change to any class or any career outside of your class, and it costs quite a bit more experience points. And we'll look at the cost of that later on. But it's worth looking through the professions here. They're a lot of fun and really cool and really flavorful. And like I said, they really get you in the mood and really help with developing your character, I think. And they're very specific, and some of them are quite funny, and some of them are just downright cool. So you have the Agitator, which is cool, Alchemist Apprentice, Artisan's Apprentice, and they're not all equal either. That's another reason I think rolling randomly is really cool, because you're going to have some characters that are just better than others, and that's all good in my book. I think it's really cool. The Bod, which is a professional, a guide or escort through the seedier districts. A beggar, boatman, bodyguard, bounty hunter, coachman, druid, engineer, entertainer. The entertainer has a shitload of stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. Entertainer, you have to pick a specific type of entertainer, and then you get a certain skill and a certain trapping. Okay. So that's cool. And you can be, like an animal actor, an actor, a jester, a poet, singer, strongman. Excisemen are probably the least popular citizens of the old world. No matter how benevolent the government might be or how many great public works it may undertake, the fact remains that no one likes paying taxes, and the tax collector bears the brunt of this resentment. So they're taxmen. Cool. Fisherman, footpad, gambler, gamekeeper, grave robber, herbalist, herdsman, hunter, hypnotist, initiate, jailer, laborer, marine, mercenary, militiaman, minstrel, mule skinner, noble, outlaw, outrider, peddler, pharmacist, physician, student, pilot, pit fighter, prospector, protagonist, racketeer, rat catcher, probably my favorite of the careers. I think because I think the first character ever played in Warhammer Fantasy, I rolled up a rat catcher, and the rat catcher's awesome. And he starts with a small but vicious dog. Awesome. Road warden, runner, wrestler, scribe, seaman, seer's servant, smuggler, soldier, squire, student, thief, tollkeeper, tomb robber, trader, trapper, troll slayer, tunnel fighter, watchman, wizard's apprentice, and woodsman. Woo! That is a lot of careers. And some more cool art here. So now we're on to skills. And hopefully you understand how the careers work, roughly. So the way skills work in this is they don't add necessarily, like, it's not like most games where you get like a rank in a skill and then you add it to your rank in characteristics and that's your total skill rating. No, that's not how it works. Skills usually just give you a flat bonus to certain characteristic tests depending on the situation. Is typically how most skills work. Now, some skills are like special abilities, such as I'm trying to see, like lightning reflexes would be one, or magical awareness would be another, magical sense, night vision, ambidextrous, excellent vision, fire eating. Fire eating is an actual skill. so frenzied attack, so it's a mix of like special abilities and actual, skills that you would think. And essentially, if it's a just regular skill, it's just going to give you a flat bonus. And sometimes in certain situations, depending on what it is, you just can't do certain things, or you get a penalty if you don't have that skill, depending on what it is. So that's essentially how skills work. We already talked about how you gain skills and whatnot. This is the skill chart if you're generating like NPCs. And yeah, so that's skills. Let's just skip ahead here. Let's look at bookmarks. Where are we at? Skills. And, so here's what a character would look like after it's all filled in. You would have your character name, your race, gender, class, alignment. You roll up your age, height, weight, hair, eyes, your current career, your career exits. And this is your starter profile that you rolled. Your advanced scheme, which tells you, what your advancement opportunities are in that current career. And then what your current profile is, so you know what you've advanced and what you haven't advanced. And then it has places where you write down your weapons and armor and your skills. And armor points we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then, it's got all of the stuff for, equipment and movement and all that. Trappings, mandatory skills, where to determine that, skill charts. Hold on, let me find out where I was here. Okay, let's just skip ahead a little bit. Dang it. Sorry, guys. I lost my place here. Let me just do this. Okay, so skills. And then we are on to the Game Master section. Okay, sorry about that. So we already talked about how you do tests. And, tests are performed, with a D100. And you're trying to roll equal to or under your skill. They can be modified if they're an easy or difficult test. And if the test is failed by more than 20%, things have gone seriously wrong. If more by 30%, things have gone nightmarishly wrong. Combined tests. Here's some cool color plates. Here's the old world. So you can help people out. And it gives some standard tests and what to roll. And it's not always it's usually always a percentile test. If you're resisting like disease or poison, it's toughness times 10 or something like that. If you're resisting like magic, it's your willpower, obviously. Listening, you have a base percentage chance, and then that's modified if you have acute hearing or whatever, or if the person sneaking has silent move. Let's see. Sneaking has a base 30%. For example, strength, like a strength test, is your strength score times 10, et cetera, et cetera. So that's basically how, tests work, essentially. And it goes in a pretty good, pretty detailed explanation of, all these different types of tests and what you need to roll and whatnot. You could ignore a lot of these things. There are some special, things like stupidity and fear and terror, which is, another throwback, not really a throwback because it was made at the same time, but another calling to the miniature rules. where you have those kind of things as well. So I guess just to make it compatible with this game, they included it here too. And certain creatures like trolls, for example, have to take stupidity test, and certain things cause fear, like a lich or whatever. So movement, and it gives the movement rates, pretty standard stuff, and it's in yards, essentially. Well, it's in inches, technically, because it assumes that you're probably going to be using, the Citadel miniatures, right? The Warhammer miniatures. And so, but each inch equals 2 yards, I believe. Movement rates for, horses and coaches and rowing boats. Swimming rules, all that good stuff. Climbing and jumping and all that. Different vision radiuses for light and darkness. Hacking through doors and destroying buildings and all that good stuff. Here's some pretty badass art. Again by Tony Acklin. Traps and such. Here's a really great John Blanche piece from the Enemy Within module. And I think these color plates were added in here. I'm not sure they were in the original first edition. I don't know because I have never looked at it. This PDF I bought from DriveThruRPG, and they mentioned it had these color plates in there. But I do know that this was the cover of Enemy Within, which is one of the most famous, campaign modules of all time. And, John Blanche, legendary artist, pretty much set the mood and tone for the grim dark world of Warhammer, and I would dare say pretty much created what we think of as like grim dark fantasy today. So John Blanche is really awesome. My book, and this piece is really cool. Poisons, we kind of talked about poisons, and you take a poison test. It's toughness times 10, and then if you fail, you suffer the effects of the poison. And here's all the different poisons and what happens to you. It does mention that poisons should be rare and expensive to make, and it has rules for manufacturing poisons and such. Because poisons are fairly potent and powerful, it tries to put some limitations on them, as it should. Diseases, it does have rules for contracting diseases, because this is about as grim dark as you get. Now, it's actually pretty reasonable. You're only going to contract these things if it comes up in game. So, it says, it gives some diseases here like the Black Plague, but it mentions that the Black Plague is pretty rare and has been, right here. Unfortunately, the Black Plague is very rare. The last known outbreak anywhere in the old world was almost a century ago. So there you go. But you could include it as some special encounter in your game. And, it has rules for that, for different diseases like that. Red pox, tomb rot, wound infection, etc. Insanity is an important thing. So insanity, you gain insanity points for certain things. So critical hits. 1 point is gained each time a character is forced to roll on the critical hits table. Terror. 1 point is gained every time the character fails a terror test. Deliriance. Insanity points may be gained as a result of using deliriant poisons. So again, if you're making poisons and you're using deliriant poisons, hallucinogenics essentially, it could drive you insane. Other points may also be gained at the GM's discretion for any experience of a particularly horrible or disturbing kind. Suffering torture, for example, or encounters with particularly vile creatures of chaos. A number of determined by the result of the cool test. So for every point you fail your cool test, so it gives some recommendations how many points, a set number like 1, 2, 3, or it could be a certain amount depending on how much you fail your cool test by, or random number, D4, D6, etc. Now, every time you gain 6 insanity points, you have to make a cool test immediately. If the test is passed, there is no immediate effect, and the insanity total remains the same. And the character must make this test again the next time additional insanity points are gained. If the first or any subsequent test is failed, the character develops a disorder and loses 6 insanity points. And so, if you gain 6 insanity points, fail your cool test, you get a disorder, and you have to roll in the disorder table. And it could be anything: animosity, anorexia, claustrophobia, depression, drug addiction, alcoholism, manic depression, kleptomania, schizophrenia, all kinds of things. It's pretty nuts, but it's a lot of fun. And of course, should be treated with care, but it can be a lot of fun if played right. Some more cool art here. I'm not sure who did that one. I think probably Tony Ackland. Alignments. So you have law, good, neutral, evil, and chaos. And that's the alignments. Rate of advancement. So, in a single evening's play, characters can expect to earn between 100 and 300 experience points. So you can spend experience points. Well, how do you spend them? So there's no levels per se. You just spend experience points to increase your characteristics or to change careers or buy spells, as we'll see later. Let me get a drink here. Oh. So you can advance. How much does it cost? I forget. You can trade in 100 experience points, and to advance one of the appropriate characteristics, the rise will be 10 points for a percentage characteristic and 1 point for any other. And of course, it has to be one of the advancements on your career, of course. Changing careers, like we were discussing earlier. If the player may choose any of the careers listed under the career exits, it costs 100 experience points. The player may choose any of the basic careers shown on the career chart for his character class. This costs 100 experience points, so I was wrong about that. It's the same amount. A character may choose a basic career from another class. This costs 200 experience points. Characters may normally change careers at any time, provided they have the 100 experience points to do so. In some cases, however, it is necessary for characters to have taken every advance and skill available from one career in order to progress to another. And so, like that's, for example, the wizards, it gives the example here. The wizard's apprentice, you can't become a wizard until you fully go through the whole rigmarole of being a wizard's apprentice. Or an alchemist, you can't be an alchemist till you go through the whole, you have to advance everything in the alchemist, then you can advance alchemist's apprentice, then you can become a full-blown alchemist, for example. So when you gain a new career, the new career's description will include a range of skills. Unlike those associated with the first career, the character does not gain these skills automatically. They must be acquired in the same way as characteristic advances at the cost of 100 experience points each. So there you go. New advanced scheme, of course. You write down your new advanced scheme. Old career abilities. You do not lose any of your abilities from your previous career. You can, interrupt and break up career paths to, take on another career. Yep. Gives rules for creating experienced character, completing basic careers. Uh, so the basic careers, blah, blah, blah. Once all the advances in a career have been taken, the character can be considered to have completed the career and may then select any of the career exits. This new career may be an advanced career or another from the list of basic careers, and it will work in much the same way in game terms. However, since the character is now an adventurer, it cannot work in quite the same way in terms of the character's activities. After the first initial career, each career, basic or advanced, that the character follows may be thought of as an adventuring career. So there you go. Adventuring careers are, are more experienced, careers. Sorry, I'm a little slow tonight. And then you have advanced careers, like we were just talking about. You have alchemist, artillerist, artisan, assassin, charlatan, cleric, counterfeiter, demagogue, druidic priest, duelist, explorer, fence, forger, freelance, giant slayer, gunner, highwayman, judicial champion, lawyer, mercenary captain. You start off as a sergeant and then advance to a captain. Merchant, navigator, outlaw chief, physician, racketeer, sapper, scholar, scout, sea captain. I think you start off as a mate and then become a captain, I think. Slaver, spy, targeteer, Templar, torturer, witch hunter, and wizards. Wizards. So that's a lot of advanced careers too. Designing scenarios, it gives you advice for creating adventures, of course. How we doing on time here? 42 minutes. We might actually get through this. And probably not, actually, because we're about to talk about combat. And I'm trying to think if I want to continue or just stop there for tonight. I think we're going to stop there for tonight because combat is fairly involved. Not ridiculous. It's not Rollmaster, guys. But it's fairly involved. And also I want to talk about Magic 2 and some of the lore about the old world. So I think that's a good place to stop and break this up into two parts. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and this talk about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Next week we're going to do part 2 and talk about combat and magic and a little bit about the lore of the old world. Just a little bit. I'm not going to go into like a full detailed thing about the lore because that could take a multitude of videos. And also there's tons and tons of videos on YouTube of people talking about the lore of Warhammer Fantasy in the old world. Let's see. There was no Prowlers and Paragons game this last Sunday. One of my players had to cancel. It seems like it's been a common occurrence. Oh, well, it is what it is. And, my rule is if it gets canceled, then we play it the next scheduled week. We are scheduled to play OSC this weekend. Hopefully it goes better than Session 0. I have faith it will. So that should be fun. So, don't let me be the Debbie Downer. I think it's gonna be good. It's gonna be a lot of fun. What else we got coming up? We did the book club Friday for Lord of the Rings book club. Looks like nobody's joining us for that, and that's fine. But hey, it's not too late. We have started reading. We are reading chapters 1 through 6, and we will talk about them not this Friday, but the following Friday. So if you want to join us, it's not too late. Dust off your copy of Lord of the Rings and read chapters 1 through 6 and join us in the chat. And also you can join us on the actual stream if you want to. And if we get more people involved, I'll actually throw the links out there on the chat so you all can join in and chat about it. You don't necessarily have to read along with us either. If you just want to join us and share in our experience, of us reading the book and just want to, if you've already read it, that's fine. Don't feel like reading again. Cool, just come hang out with us and chat about Lord of the Rings, because that's what we're going to be doing. It should be awesome. But needless to say, I'm really excited for that. And I have not started reading yet because I haven't had time. I'll probably read a couple chapters tonight. What else? I think that's about it. I do want to say Friday, Friday I will be playing a Bears game, which was against the Dark Master. We are not playing against the Dark Master anymore. We are playing his rule set, Bastard Sword. And basically we're going to be playing a full-on campaign, but also play testing his new system. And that should be really cool. I really like the looks of Bear's new system he's working on. It's really cool that he's involving everybody in the community to help contribute to it. Even though he, of course, has the final say in all the design decisions, it's still cool that it's a collaborative effort. That will be simul-streamed on my channel too. But go check out Bear's channel as well. He's got some cool stuff. And what else? Tomorrow, of course, I'll be back on the Four Color Cafe, and we're going to be doing a live play of Cocaine Owlbear. And I don't know, I think the guy's name is Mike. I don't know him. I've never met him. He designed this fun little game that's basically a hack of Honey Heist, the fun little role-playing game. This is definitely just a wacky, fun kind of game that he designed. And so I'm going to be playing it. I'm going to be participating in that demo game tomorrow. Again, it's going to be on Bear's channel, but I'm going to be simul-streaming it on my channel, and everybody else will be as well. So should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give me a thumbs up if you did. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night. Peace.